Hello and welcome to Salute Your Sports. Common Enchev here with Tom Castleman. We're ready for a fun show. We have some fantastic March Madness topics to go over. We recap an awesome opening weekend of the tournament, focusing on the biggest stars, the stories, and more. Both of us still have all four teams still dancing. Are we sticking with our picks? Are we revising some teams? A lot to talk about, no doubt about that. Another winning week for both of us in betting locks of the week. I think 5-1 as a show. 3-0. Tom Castleman is back, baby. Plus, we have sports trivia, statements of the week, and more. A really exciting time to be a sports fan. Baseball opening week this week. I'll have a little baseball trivia at the end.
Nice.
We're going to focus on March Madness this program, but I know there's going to be baseball, NBA, and of course, all this NFL draft stuff. We're a weekly show. We don't want to have the exact same topics every week, but we'll get plenty of that the next few weeks. But today, just like last week, major focus on March Madness. It is the biggest sports tournament right now in the country. I can't wait to get started, Tom. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Common. As you said, feeling great about the bracket for the most part. Had a couple of upset Elite Eights go out, which is a little bit unfortunate, but thankfully nothing too serious, as of course picking the champion, the championship game, and the Final Four is where you're going to get most of your points being in a bracket. So in both bracket pools that I am in, everybody is still alive. Everybody still has a chance, but
not me. I have some work people who pick Kentucky and at my work. They're toast.
Oh, that's right. You're in a couple extra pools. That's right.
Yes.
But yeah,
I actually had someone picked Auburn in my friend's family pool. Someone had Auburn. So I know I'm in first or second in all the pools. I have 7 out of 8 Elite Eight teams. I think Kentucky's the only one I'm missing. I did pick 4 upsets, Tom, and by upsets, I'm considering 11 or higher. I don't count 10-7, 9-8 as an upset. I think I picked New Mexico, which I missed, but then I hit the other 3. Duquesne, 11-6, NC State, 11-6, and Grand Canyon, 12-5. Did pretty good on upsets this year. 3 out of 4.
With those upsets, I mean, that leads into some of the best stories of the March Madness tournament so far. And I think the biggest one that folks have been talking about easily is Oakland over Kentucky, the 14 seed over the 3. Just because you have so many great stories. I mean, going into that game, I initially thought, as I'm sure 90% of the viewing audience, if not higher, thought, Oakland, California, but it's actually a small school in Michigan. You've got their coach, Greg Kampe, who's been there for like 40-something years. And then this guy, Jack Golke, who's, also I would consider a little, star of the tournament as well. Somebody who has attempted like 327 3-point shots.
And 8 2-point attempts.
2-point shots. And somebody, I saw a heat map. I saw a heat chart for him as far as the shots.
The one jumper.
The one mid-range.
Yeah,
I want to know what the story is behind that mid-range shot, because layups.
Someone fell down.
Make a ton of sense.
Someone fell down. Somebody fell down.
That was the first shot that he took, and he was just like, you know what? Didn't like that. That doesn't fit with this. You talk about analytics and going all or nothing now. 3 true outcome type of player, but of course that is an absolute great story. Yale over Auburn. Auburn, a team that a lot of folks thought was underseeded. And if you look at adjusted efficiency metrics like KenPom, one of my favorite jumping off points as far as looking at teams go, I mean, looking at KenPom, Auburn's out of the tournament. They're still the 4th best team in the country, but they had one bad game, and that's the beauty of March Madness. So Yale over Auburn, I think, is a pretty big story as well. Common, what are some of the stories that have jumped out to you as far as either small schools or big schools in the tournament so far?
Yeah, you hit on a couple, Tom. You said this best last week. We were talking about who are going to be the stars of the tournament. We had the Zach Edey's of the world, Terrence Shannon Jr., these guys that we know who they are, the March Madness big names. You said it best. You said there's going to be somebody who we don't know anything about, and that is Jack Golke. I know Oakland's story as a team, but he's the story as an individual. So they knocked out Kentucky full of NBA players. As Jack Golke said, I'm not going to play in the NBA. Then I did see a funny tweet that said, Eric Spoelstra will use you for 7-8 minutes off the bench. That's what he does with those small guys. But, 14 seed over a 3 seed. Oakland, in the history of the program, had one NCAA tournament win, and that was a playing 16 versus 16 a few years back. So they never had a true NCAA tournament win, as I would call it. Now, Jack Gohlke did 10 threes, which is the second most in NCAA tournament history, off the bench, Tom. Off the bench. I know he plays most of the game. He's one of those guys that plays 30 minutes a game, roughly, give or take, but he does come off the bench. He played 5 years of community or D2 basketball. D2 basketball, 5 years. Out of high school, he was a 0-star recruit. He had 0 D1 offers. After 5 years of D2 college basketball, he had 1 offer. 1 NCAA D1 offer. It was Oakland, and it paid off for him, paid off for them. My goodness. He had a lot of really good shots, and a lot of guys will say, well, Kentucky doesn't play defense. If you watch those shots, a couple open looks like everyone will get, but he had about 6, 7 of these that were contested threes that, were coming off a screen, fading away, had some incredible threes. He is definitely, the biggest story as far as a player, as far as a team, because let's be honest, we got 1 double-digit seed in the Sweet 16. It is NC State as an 11 seed out of the ACC. I wouldn't call them a powerhouse, but they're a solid basketball school, a team that we have seen make runs before, a team that has been in the tournament. I guess they're an upset story in the sense they're an 11 seed, but we don't really have a true Cinderella darling. Oakland with that 14-3 upset was by far, I think, the biggest upset. I mean, Yale, like you said, was a big one, 13-4 as well. But do have some other great stories. NC State, who made the tournament only because they won the ACC conference. DJ Burns has been a beast for them. Them getting in the Sweet 16 is a good story. I think Duquesne getting the upset against BYU. LeBron's old high school coach, Keith Dambrett, he's ending his career with an NCAA tournament win. He's retiring. I know he technically lost the last game, but the last time coaching basketball for him, you told him you're going to win an NCAA tournament game as
That's
an
a pretty
11
good way to
seed,
go, yeah.
and you're losing the second round. He'll be just fine with it. So that was a neat story. I think a couple other stories to focus on is a lot of these overtime games. We haven't had necessarily so many buzzer beaters. It's been kind of one of those like drama where in overtime one team pulls away. But we had the Oregon-Creighton double OT where obviously Oregon was exhausted late in that game, cost them late. Houston, Texas. Houston blows that lead. There's a 3 at the buzzer to tie the game. They got like 4 guys that are fouled out. They have a walk-on at the free throw line that's taken 4 free throws the whole season. And to his credit, goes 1 for 2, Tom. They'll take that in this scenario. They'll take the 1 for 2. That was a dramatic game. Then I do have a couple other storylines that are different. I know we normally associate March Madness with the underdog, with the upsets. I got 2 other different storylines that focus in on the favorites. I think UConn, a number 1 seed, trying to be the first team to repeat since the 2006-2007 Florida Gators, led by Joakim Noah and Al Horford. Al Horford, a post player in college. Now he's out there raining threes against the Bulls in the NBA. Man, has the game changed. And then the other story for me that's interesting is Purdue. I mean, they've lost to a double-digit seed the last few tournaments. They're consistently a team that underachieves, a team that's had really good players, that hasn't made that deep run, hasn't made that Final Four run, hasn't won that championship. They look razor sharp. It's like one of those, they're like, we're not messing around this year. A lot of folks pick them as the 1-1 seed that's going to be out. I know I've got 3 1 seeds in the Final Four, and Purdue's not one of them. So they are making a lot of folks question their brackets, including yours truly. But it is Zach Edey. We talk about, is he going to be a great NBA player? Maybe not. Is he more of a college player? Probably. That remains to be seen, of course. I know Trace Jackson Davis is doing a really good job as a role player for the Warriors. So I think he'll be a pro player personally, Tom. I don't think he's going to be a superstar, but when it comes to the college game, he is one of the all-time great college basketball players. And he's had about to be 2 straight, Player of the Year awards. It just has not had that March run. So it'll be interesting to see how Zach Edey does in March, if that narrative changes a little bit for him. So those are kind of some of the biggest ones I'm looking at. I'm
Yeah.
sure I missed something. I don't know if you have anything else
Well,
that I didn't key in on.
kind of like tying in Purdue a little bit of, at least to this point, some of the big time schools exercising some demons, or advancing to a point where a lot of people were fading some teams. I mean, Purdue, of course, is one that everybody's going to circle because they're on the infamous list of two teams that have lost as the 1 seed to a 16 seed.
Mhm.
Of course, Virginia did that, and then the next year won the title. So I wonder if there's a little bit of that storyline that could be available there. And
Sure.
certainly, Purdue's going to have to prove it going up against Gonzaga. You want to talk about a big school in a smaller conference, or in a conference that typically only gets two bids. Mark Few and the Gonzaga Bulldogs do not miss Sweet 16s. So that's,
Never,
I think,
seems
another
like.
big story. But as far as the Demons thing goes, I mean, Tommy Lloyd out of Arizona and Rick Barnes out of Tennessee, both known
Mhm.
for having some early tournament issues. Both of them getting through pretty handily to this point. I know it was a little bit of a closer game against Texas for a while, but Tennessee threw fairly easily. In Arizona, they've struggled in game for like short stretches, but the outcome has never really been in doubt by the time it gets down to those closing minutes. So I think that there's a couple of coaches that, to this point, are taking full advantage of the talent that they have around them, and getting to this point where once you're in the Sweet 16, especially now that there aren't any true underdogs. I know you mentioned NC State is as an 11th seed, but they're from a Power Five conference, so I don't count them really as an underdog Cinderella team, really. So I think that's a pretty big story too, and that kind of ties into the next topic that we have, which is the lack of upsets. I mean, this is the fifth time since the NCAA tournament began seeding back in, I think it was 1979. This is the fifth time that all one and all two seeds are through to the Sweet 16, first time since 2019. And we're coming off of a tournament where it's kind of funny. It's
But no
polar
one seeds
opposite.
last year, the Final Four.
Last year, it was a 4 seed in Connecticut, a 5 seed in Miami and San Diego State, and then Florida Atlantic, a 9 seed, that were making up the Final Four. This year, I mean, we're almost guaranteed ones and twos, given how things are shaking. I mean, there's a couple teams that could maybe make a little bit of a run, but I mean, outside of NC State, like, they're the only double-digit seed, and even from the lower seeds, we're really only looking at
Clemson,
Clemson
I
and
think, is the second
Gonzaga.
lowest. Six.
Yeah, I mean, talk about a
Six.
team that everybody was
Six.
fading. So,
Six.
yeah,
That's the I mean, like, everyone else is 1 through 5, and Gonzaga's
hmm
5, but I think there's a lot of 1, 2, 3, and 4 seeds in here.
exactly. Yeah, so it's kind of like, why have there been so few upsets this year? And to me, the answer really is variance. I mean, as human beings, our evolutionary superpower, our natural superpower, is finding patterns
Sure.
and trying to make sense of patterns, and even in situations where patterns don't work. I mean, this is a tournament where there's like 9 quintillion possibilities. I mean, compare that to Doctor Strange Infinity War, seeing 14 million possibilities. I did the math. Let me see if I can remember it off the top of my head, because I was talking about it over the weekend. I think for every one possibility that Doctor Strange saw, you'd have to see like another 10 billion brackets. Like, so there's 10 billion brackets per each
Shout
vision
out
that Doctor
Tony
Strange
Stark,
had.
baby.
Just the one. But I think it's really just variance is the story to this tournament, because I mean, you look at, again, I'm going to Ken Pom. I get poked fun at for going to it all the time, but there's no real pattern in teams that are advancing. You have Alabama, Illinois, teams that are great with their adjusted offensive efficiency, terrible on defense. They've made it this far, but you look at another team that's similar, like, say, Kentucky, or say like BYU, really good on offense, maybe not as good on defense. Baylor, another great
They're
example.
gone.
They're all home. And then you flip it to the other side, Auburn, a very balanced team, both on offense and defense. They are at home. You look at teams that are really strong on defense, Michigan State, for example. Let me see, I'm blanking on some of the other ones. Kansas, stronger on defense than they are on offense. They are at home. So we have all types of teams still advanced in the tourney. So I don't really know if there's any sort of signal to make out of all the noise here, other than just this is a year where good teams have been winning games for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is they always say the law of averages, it evens out. I think, in a tournament last year, we had no one seeds. We're probably due for something like this to happen. I think the variance is a good way to put it in your part. Also, if you look at it this year, there was a lot of upsets during the season and a lot of upsets in the conference tournaments. We're talking about last week how there was 4 or 5 typical at-large bids that didn't get in because we had upsets in the conference tournaments. So obviously we know in March Madness anything can happen. There's going to be
Hmm.
years where there's a lot of upsets, years where there's not going to be. But if you do want to point to something for maybe a reason why this specific, I do have a couple reasons for you, Tom. Really,
Sure.
one, to be honest, outside of just, I guess, sheer luck and variance, as you said. I think it's the good teams having experience. I think
Sure.
we're seeing a lot of them. That's the whole question mark, is the era of the one and done. Kentucky no longer is winning with the freshmen. Is that over?
Hmm.
I think a lot of these top teams have senior leadership, like Purdue, for example. Zach Edey, he's a senior, the best player in the country for college basketball, senior. You look at UNC, a one seed, Armando Bacot, RJ Davis, 2 seniors for them. You look at UConn, they got 2 3 starters back from last year's championship team, juniors, seniors. You look at Houston, their 2 guards, their 2 best players, seniors. I mean, UNC, by the way, Tom, their starter age is 22.2. Oklahoma City Thunder is 22.6. So they are
Hmm.
nearly as old as the Oklahoma City Thunder in the NBA. So I think, we haven't really had the massive, lottery pick star in recent years. And we've seen the guys like Zach Edey, Armando Bacot. Are these guys going to be great pro players? Probably not. You never know. I mean, Edey, I think, could surprise
Yeah.
people, but realistically, we're not talking about, multi-tier all-stars. But what Zach Edey, Armando Bacot are, great college basketball players. Fantastic college players. I mean, you look at Marquette, their point guard who's back. Fantastic college basketball players. Is he going to be a good pro? He'll probably be a pro. Is he going to be an all-star? Probably not. But we have senior, junior, experienced players that are leading a lot of these 1 and 2 seeds, programs that have been there, done that. I think that goes a long way as to why some of these 1 seeds, Houston, Purdue, and UNC, and UConn in particular, those 4 1 seeds, they all have seniors, they all have juniors. They're not led by freshmen coming in. So that does go a long way for me. A big reason why some of these teams are not getting upset, because they've already been upset. Zach
Yeah.
Edey's been upset. I mean, UNC didn't even make the tournament last year. These senior players have gone through the adversity and they've come out the other way because they are, I'm not going to say grown men, but a lot of these guys are much closer to men than kids compared to some of the freshmen on a team like Kentucky, even
Hmm.
Gonzaga. Gonzaga's used to having a lot of really good recruits in recent years. They don't really have a pro prospect, at least not an elite level pro prospect, but they've got some guys too that just know how to play the game. So that is one other reason, other than variance, why maybe we have seen some of these,
Hmm.
big level programs advancing, because they're more senior led than past seasons.
Yeah, and another thing to tie in really quickly, I can't remember if I mentioned this in the show last week or if I learned this like in my research after the show. But there was some talk about how there were a lot of quote unquote bid thieves as far as teams from these smaller conferences that only get the one automatic qualifying bid, that wasn't the top team in the tournament. So it was one of those things where, like, because we had so many upsets in conference play and conference tournament play, that meant that there's a less likely the chance that the bottom teams are going to go on these more prolonged runs through, Cinderella runs to the tournament. That the bottom kind of like 2 3 seeds of the bracket weren't necessarily going to be as strong, quote unquote, as they would be in other years. So that could be another reason
Sure.
that we're seeing fewer upsets. Is
Yeah.
that you give these teams like like a Yale, like a Duquesne, because Duquesne wasn't supposed to be in the NCAA tournament. Again, I say that with air quotes, but they go ahead, they win their automatic qualifying bid. They find out who the team is that they're playing is, whether it's Brigham Young or Auburn or whomever, and then they've got like 3 4 days to come up with a really really strong game plan, despite being at a talent, for the most part, a talent disadvantage, and oftentimes as well a size disadvantage against a bigger program. That maybe It's that they're able to get that one upset win, but they don't necessarily have the talent, depth, experience, what have you, to make a multi-week run out of this thing. I mean, part of why NC State is here is because they did go up against Oakland in that second matchup. But
Mm-hmm.
NC State had beaten Kentucky, for example. I mean, that's the sort of,
Not in a
that's the beauty
7-game
of the tournament.
series.
Yeah, not a 7 game series. Maybe not even in the
Yeah,
one game. Maybe
sure.
Kentucky is like, hey, we sweated a close one against Oakland. We can't take NC State lightly, and they come
Sure.
out firing. Like that could be it too. So I think that that's another reason why we haven't seen as many upsets, is because there just haven't been as many strong Cinderella teams for advancing multiple stages into the tournament, that we get some of these great, buzzer beating wins from small schools to start out in the round of 64. But in the round of 62, after you have a short turnaround, you don't have a ton of time to game plan necessarily. That allows for just the natural talent and experience to bear out a little more. So I think those are a couple of really good reasons. The experience is a fantastic reason as well for some of these bigger programs making it through. So
The
as you said,
stars, Tom. I know you skipped
yeah,
over, but it's fine because it transitioned well. We
mhm,
don't want to key on the stars before we do our final four.
that too, yeah.
Yeah. So biggest
Yes,
stars of
yes.
the tournament.
Yeah, we mentioned Jack Olke from Oakland, touched on DJ Burns a little bit out of NC State, a big blue blood program that we have not really touched on yet. Duke, Jared McCain has been having a fantastic tournament as well.
3-point
Uh,
barrage.
yeah, just absolutely fantastic. I mean, it was Jack Olke in round one. It was Jared McCain in round two. That's the type of play that Duke is going to need, because we've seen them get kind of pushed around a little bit. I think Vermont did a really, really good job limiting Kyle Filipowski in round one. And then, JMU, they were a bit more physical with Wisconsin in round one than they were with Duke in round two. But you're going to need good guard play from Duke if you're going to have a puncher's chance against a really rugged, really tough Houston team. So he's another star. And of course, you look, Klingon is the big star for UConn, or one of the big stars for UConn. He's been fantastic. We already talked about Jack Edey. Common, who are a couple other stars really quickly that have come out of the
Yeah.
tournament so far?
Yeah. I mean, I think Jack Golke, which you said, 32 points, 10 threes the first game, 22 points in 6 threes the second game. He's kind of America's darling. Zach Edey's been one of those guys that's even better than the stats. 30 points, 21 rebounds, 3 blocks the first game. Second game, 23 points, 14 rebounds, 3 blocks. But he had like 20 points at the half. Like the second half, they were up so much. They took him out early, could have put up even bigger numbers. Do you want to give a shout out to a couple guys who are no longer in the tournament? That'd be the 2 Oregon stars. Jermaine Cousinard put up 40 points in the first game, 32 in the second game. That's 72 points over 2 games. You don't really see that very much in the tournament. I think Dante, the big guy, 23 points the first game, 28 points and 20 rebounds the second game. Those 2 guys were excellent until they finally ran out of gas in the second overtime against Creighton, because they did literally everything for the Oregon Ducks. Now, I think Tyler Kolek for Marquette is back. Now, their talented point guard who's coming off injury. Now, he's actually, believe this or not, Tom, the 3rd player in the history of the NCAA tournament to have multiple games of at least 18 points, 11 assists, and 5 rebounds. He had 21 and 11, 18 and 11 in the 2 games. The other 2 guys that have had 18 points, 11 assists, and 5 rebounds in multiple tournament games in the same tournament are Magic Johnson and Oscar Robertson. That is pretty good company for Tyler Kolek.
That's some tall timber.
Yeah, so Jamal Shed for Houston, averaging 16 points, about 9.5 assists a game. Star player on that Houston team. Is a really good guy, of course. Did have McCain down for Duke, 3-point barrage in their last game. So a lot of great players in this tournament. I know we talk about maybe there's not the great NBA prospect. Terrence Shannon Jr., though, for Illinois as well, putting up a lot of points. A lot of hustle plays for him, too. He could score 30 plus. Then he's also diving on the floor. He's been a big story as well. So I love to see a lot of these key players really shining. I know, Kentucky's got, some talented players. They're out. I know, but overall, a lot of the best players are out there. We love to see the upsets, but from an aesthetic, like basketball perspective, as far as talent goes, I like to see the big teams play in the Final Four, maybe the Elite Eight. I do like having a Cinderella team left in the Sweet 16. But all these power matchups are going to make for some incredible basketball games in the next few rounds, to say the least, Tom.
Yeah, and speaking of those matchups, as we mentioned right off the top of the show, both of our Final Fours are still intact. So it really allows, for a moment of reflection here as far as our picks go. I don't think we're going to deviate. I think you and I are both the type of individual that if we have picked matchups to this point, we're going to stick with them. So for me, as a quick reminder, I have Connecticut coming out of the East. I have Arizona out of the West, Purdue out of the Midwest, and then Houston out of the South. I will say, though, those teams I think I'm going to stick with them as my picks, but I would say that after this first weekend, feeling really good about Connecticut, feeling really good about Purdue, feeling pretty good about Arizona. I think that's looking more and more like a really fun matchup in the Elite Eight against North Carolina. I think that's going to be a pretty fun matchup to watch there. The team that does give me a moment for pause, however, is Houston. And just touch on that a little bit briefly. I know coming into the tournament, nobody was doubting their coaching. Kelvin Sampson is a fantastic coach. Nobody's doubting their talent. But depth and injury kind of comes into play a little bit. And we saw that where you're riding a tight rotation all throughout a game. Texas A&M was able to storm back from a pretty big deficit to push it to overtime. And overtime where Houston saw was 4 players foul out of the game. They had guys taking free throws, like clutch free throws, that had played
It was a walk-on.
Minutes the entire season.
4 free throws the entire season.
And for both players that came on with very, very little in-game experience, both of them bricked the first free throw. To their credit, they didn't let the pressure overwhelm them to the point that they missed the second one as well. But that's the sort of thing that can be concerning. If Houston finds themselves getting into foul trouble against a team like Duke, which is very capable of making its shots, Marquette with Tyler Kolek, he is showing no issues coming back from that oblique injury, which I thought could have been a story for Marquette if that were kind of like to flare up again. That could be a little bit troublesome for them, but I feel Marquette is going to be a pretty smooth sailing over North Carolina State to the Elite Eight. So Houston's got a tough road ahead of them. I think tougher than any of the other Final Four teams that we have going so far. I mean, you might think UNC has a little bit of an easier path, but I just think that because of the lack of depth that Houston has as of right now, that can be tricky for them, and that gives me a moment to pause for them going to the tournament or continuing in the tournament to the Final Four.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you just said. I've got my 4 Final Four teams: UNC, UConn, Houston, and Tennessee. I've actually crunched the numbers, Tom, because I'm terrified of Purdue. You and I both have UConn winning it all. Mm-hmm. If UNC beats Arizona, and if I get my other Final Four teams, I can still finish ahead of you the bracket, even if Purdue makes the championship. So I could rest easy. There is a path to me beating you because you had UNC out in the second round. Thank you, Tar Heels. So, man, you and I think you were my main competition. We both picked UConn. Mm-hmm. So I'm anticipating a 1-2 finish in our.
Jake Schlegel's got Illinois, and Drew has Purdue winning it all. So they both have very lively paths to winning it all. I mean, even Allie, if she gets UNC to win it all, yeah.
Now the dogs are out, though. They're out.
There is a limit to how much picking based off treats is going to get you. But yeah, they had a good run initially.
Initially, a good run for Henry. Radar struggled right off the bat. So I look at these teams as far as kind of the way you put it, level of confidence. Speaking of Radar, he's over here at the door. What's up, Radar? Come here, buddy. Come here, Radar. Come here. He wants to go out apparently, but UConn is the one that I put like a 10. I mean, I think they're the best team in the country. Amazing, cruising through the tournament so far. A plus 56-point differential through 2 games is the 3rd best ever for a repeat champion. Plus 56, winning by an average of 28 points per game. Both games were over at the half. I know Northwestern made a mini run in the second half, made it look a little bit closer than it was, but UConn was cruising. It was never a doubt. They have so much depth. They can beat you inside and outside. They can shoot. They can run on, in transition. They can play defense. They're super athletic. And Dan Hurley is, quite frankly, a perfectionist. I mean, they can be up 20 plus points at the half, and he's sitting there angry. He's always finding something to perfect. And that's good, though, because that's how you keep your players focused. That's how you coach. That's how you win an NCAA tournament, which they did do last year. So that's my, like, I hate to say this, maybe I'm jinxing myself, but that's my, like, level 10. Like, UConn is going to make the Final Four. I know it's a rematch against San Diego State this next game. UConn, I think, is actually better than last year. San Diego State, I think, is considerably worse than last year, where they were, in my opinion, as a basketball team. So I do think UConn should have a massive advantage against them. And I just don't think anybody in their region or the country, to be honest, can knock out UConn. I also feel really good about UNC. Like I've been saying, experience, 2-star players, ACC Player of the Year, RJ Davis on the outside, Armando Bacot on the inside. I always look for senior leadership. I look for teams that have depth, that have balance, that have ways to beat you, multiple ways to beat you. RJ Davis can make threes. Armando Bacot can get a double-double, dominant inside. That's a really, really good UNC team. I think they're going to be too much for Alabama, who doesn't play all that much defense. UNC will rebound well. They'll play good ball. I don't really see Alabama being a threat. UNC Arizona could be very interesting, assuming both teams come out. I think UNC is a better team. I really do, Tom. I've been on record saying Caleb Love is one of the most overrated players in the country. Very inconsistent guy, field goal percentage wise. What type of team can he miss a lot of shots? Well, the team that knows him really, really well, Tom. So I actually feel really good about UNC. I'm not really too worried about that Arizona matchup. But then the other two picks I have, I am 50-50 on both. Like you said, we're both going to stick with our picks. They actually had it on ESPN. Analyst says I picked this in my tournament. I'm going to stick with it. Nobody's going away from the picks they originally had. I know I certainly am not. But I think I am most concerned about Houston and Tennessee. You kind of laid out a lot of the arguments. Does Houston have enough depth? What happens if guys get in foul trouble, if guys get injured? One thing I will say, though, they did show this last game, their defense is really good. Folks are like, can they score enough? They scored plenty, 100-plus points against A&M. I just think they got a couple of really tough matchups. I think Duke is playing really good. One other storyline that maybe we didn't talk about earlier that we could have talked about is the ACC. They got the most Sweet 16 teams, I believe. 4 of them, Duke, UNC, NC State, and Clemson. A lot of folks thought the ACC was down this year. Not a lot of love for the ACC. That conference has been really good in the tournament. I know it's always tricky, like, well, is it a sample size? How much of it is a fluke? There's got to be just a little bit of truth to the conference maybe being better than many people expected. ACC looking good. I think Duke is a tough matchup. Filipowski's a big guy. McCain can shoot threes. Definitely think that game could go either way. I would pick Houston. I would also pick Houston against Marquette because, Kolek, Cam Jones, 2 awesome guards for Marquette. Well, who can stop them on awesome defense like Houston? So I'm still going to lean the Houston Cougars personally, but I truly do think that game could go either way. I am a little bit concerned about Houston, but I'm going to stick with the Cougars in my Final Four. And then Tennessee. I think Tennessee has to be concerning. I think, obviously, we're seeing a different Purdue team. I do think Tennessee can get past Creighton, but that Tennessee-Purdue game could go either way. Let me let Radar out real quickly. This guy, 1 second. Radar. Let you out, buddy. You want to go out? You go out. Go, Henry. These guys, am I right? They want their dog freedom, Tom Castleman. All right. So let me put my headphones in. Back to Tennessee. Now, one reason why I am going to stick with Tennessee, Tom, and this is kind of a little bit different than what you would usually think, is Dalton Connect. He's actually struggled lately. His outside shot has not been falling. Tennessee's outside shot against Texas, terrible. They played good defense. They made free throws. They made 2-pointers. They did not make 3-pointers. At some point, these shots will start falling. Dalton Knecht is too good of a player to miss that many shots in a row. I think his 3-point shot's going to start falling. It's the law of averages, as we say, right? So if I'm Purdue, if I'm Creighton, and I'm looking at this guy who is, a future NBA player, probably a first-team All-American, the SEC Player of the Year, and he's been missing, he'll start making. One of the most underrated players in the tournament, Zakai Ziegler for Tennessee, gets about 6 assists a game. I was watching the game against Texas. It seemed like every time down the court, true point guard puts you in the best spot. Whether he's shooting, whether he's dribbling, whether he's passing, he's got complete control of the game. I think the most underappreciated player in college basketball is Zakai Ziegler. The guy is a flat-out baller. I don't know if he's going to be an NBA player because he's short, but, man, at the college level, this guy knows how to run the show, no doubt. So I'm going to stick with Tennessee because I think we're going to see a very different Dalton Knecht this weekend. I think he's going to play a lot better. Don't be surprised to see him put up 30, 35, 40 points in one of these games because he is a true NBA player. He's got the ISO. He's got the fadeaway. He's tall. He's athletic. He can shoot. He's the guy that's next level type player. And you know how shots go. They come and go in swings. Haven't been there for him the last 3 games. Maybe the next 3 games he'll light it up. So I'm sticking with Tennessee. I'm going to go UNC, UConn, Tennessee, and Houston, my original Final Four. And then let's just get into the champion discussion.
Yeah, the championship discussion.
Who do we think is coming through?
I mean, if I'm going into this conversation saying that I'm most confident in Purdue and Connecticut so far, I have to stick with them as my championship matchup. I think it's going to be really fun to watch. I mean, Purdue has a different sort of experience than Connecticut. I mean, Connecticut, of course, winning a title last year and returning a lot of key guys from that squad. They're just as hungry for winning it all this year as well, if not more so, to prove that this isn't a fluke or anything along those lines. And then Purdue, we're looking at a team that last year was really talented, I think. But a lot of their guards, a lot of their important guys that were handling the ball, taking a lot of the big shots from outside, they were freshmen. They quite frankly just didn't really have that experience. And so when you have a team like Fairleigh Dickinson that last year was just kind of like quadrupling, quintupling, whatever the term is for a 5 instead of a double team, a 5-person team on Zach Edey, and basically saying, okay, Boilermakers, make your shots. And Purdue simply did not do that last year. This is a team that is really experienced on the other side of things that I think is coming out and really hungry to prove that they are better than what they were last year. So I'm perfectly comfortable saying that's still the championship matchup in my opinion. And I mean, Connecticut's just been amazing this season. They've had a really, really good year throughout. They were given kind of a tougher draw in the tournament. We already saw Auburn go out early, which kind of makes it a little bit smoother, a lot easier, I think, to face San Diego State. I know it's probably going to be something where a lot of folks are going to say don't sleep on the Aztecs, but I think UConn will be able to handle San Diego State fairly easily. And then they only have to play one of Iowa State or Illinois to get out of the region. So I really like Connecticut just to keep steamrolling opponents. They've shown that they can do it against smaller school programs. They've shown they can do it against big school programs. I mean, we talk about the Big East. They only had 3 teams, but all 3 teams are still dancing, and UConn is the champion of that conference. So I like UConn to win the entire thing still to repeat as champs this year. Common, you had UConn over Houston. Are you thinking maybe you might be switching to UConn over Tennessee, or are you sticking with that? Because I know that right side of the bracket a little bit more daunting of a talent.
I mean, again, I think UConn's a team to beat. I think, Tom, a crazy thing about UConn is this year they had 3 losses, and they were all road games against really, really quality teams. So they have not lost a neutral court game or a home game in a long time. I probably should have went back and looked and seen when that was, but they don't lose these type of games. UConn is really, really good in a tournament setting. They were the only 1 seed in this tournament, Tom, that won the regular season as well as the postseason tournament run, and they really weren't really tested. I mean, you look at their conference tournament. They completely ran through the competition. I mean, Marquette's a really good basketball team. UConn beat them fairly comfortably. They really haven't had a close game in the tournament yet, and they're just pretty far ahead. I mean, I think they have so much balance. I mean, I love Newton, Caravan. They got 3-point shooting. They got a big guy down low that's literally disrupting everything right now. That team just has so much firepower, and they can beat you from the outside, the inside, transition. They can win with defense athletically. They can win with offense. They have so much depth. They're a well-coached team. UConn, I think, is, for me, no doubt the team to beat. They're going to be my pick to win it all. But it does get a little bit trickier beyond UConn. I mean, who's going to be that next team? Cam Spencer, by the way, that dude's a flat-out basketball player, the three-point shooter as well. There's a whole number of teams that I would not be shocked to see. I know I mentioned Purdue wouldn't shock me if they got there. Even though I have Tennessee, I wouldn't be shocked if Tennessee got there. I wouldn't be shocked if Houston got there. I wouldn't be shocked if Marquette got there. I wouldn't be shocked if Duke got there. There's a whole bunch of teams. I'm not picking Houston versus the field. I would definitely take UConn versus the field to make the Final Four at least.
Mm-hmm.
Man, it's tough. By the way, the Big East, another storyline, a conference that was undervalued. All three Big East teams still dancing in the Sweet 16. I'm going to pick Houston. It's very tough for me to pick against my gut. I know we're looking at the recent games. I know Houston struggled in their last game. It is important to note, Tom, that was essentially a 1 or 2 game sample size, because a lot of these 1 seeds, 2 seeds, that took care of business in the opening round game against the 15, 16 teams. So we could sit here and say, well, Houston looked kind of like man that game, right? The second game didn't look great. I could also argue it the other way. They've looked so good all year. Get the off game out in the second round. I know, whatever the third round. It's the second round. I'm calling it the second round.
Yeah.
And Caitlin Clark, which will key on the women's tournament real quick, she had a really good post-conference as well last night. The post-game press conference, excuse me. Say that 3 times fast. Post-game press conference, post-game press conference, post-game press conference. She said many times that second round game is the hardest game because all the expectations are that you win, right? You're playing an 8 seed, a 9 seed, a 10 seed, a 7 seed as the 1 or 2 seed. Those teams have nothing to lose. And there's a sort of like different added pressure that sometimes having that early test can really help you and really help you make a deep run in the NCAA tournament. So there's different ways to argue the Houston thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, you could argue that, their depth was shown. It showed that they didn't have the depth. You know what? They still won, Tom. They still found a way to win. So I'm going to bet on Houston. They got the great defense. They got 2 senior guards. They got a great coach. I'll pick the Houston Cougars to make the championship game. Ultimately, though, UConn is a better offensive team. They have more depth. I think that catches up with Houston once they play UConn in the championship. The Huskies go back-to-back for the first time since the 06-07 season of Joakim Noah, Al Horford, and the Florida Gators, coached by current Bulls coach Billy Donovan.
Who, by the way, they're not going to be winning anything this year. Let's move over to the women's bracket. I mean, we're talking about still having Final Fours intact. That is still the case for both, I think, for all of us, including Drew Brackett as well, Mr. Brackett himself. So any reason to kind of come off any of our opinions here? I mean, for me, I had South Carolina. They have yet to play a game where the margin is less than 40 points as they beat up on Presbyterian and then North Carolina. Meanwhile, a couple of teams that have struggled. I mean, I don't know how much of a story that this really is in the women's tournament, but if we look at the LSU game against, Middle Tennessee, and then Iowa against West Virginia, and the clear kind of disparity in first half, second half free throws. I mean, we saw a lot more free throws on LSU's side as well as on Iowa's side, kind of indicating maybe these teams had a little bit more preference from the whistle type of thing.
I
mean,
know,
it's
but
one
a
of those.
lot of those when they were already up at the end. I watched some of that Iowa game and I saw the highlights. I thought there was maybe one play where I thought that could have been it. I think a lot of the foul calls were right, in my opinion, Tom. But you know how I am. I'm not one to believe in the refs and conspiracy theories, so on and so forth.
I mean, it's the type of thing where for me, the Occam's razor, it's just how the game went. I don't think there's a larger, grander conspiracy, but it is just a little bit convenient that when we have the opportunity for a rematch between LSU and Iowa, especially considering that, I mean, they have the game's two biggest stars, quite frankly, in Caitlin Clark and in Angel Reese. You want to have that matchup. You want to have those
Angel Reese is
eyeballs.
not the second biggest star. Really, it should be Juju Watkins, but I think Reese and Paige Beckers are just as good names. The second best player in the country is definitely Juju
Well,
Watkins for
well,
USC.
but star isn't necessarily talent. I mean, if we're talking about who has the highest Q rating, I think goes Caitlin Clark followed by Angel Reese as far as people knowing. If you like ask just random
But if
people
we're talking talent, I would say Juju Watkins
yeah,
is
but
definitely
I'm
number
not saying
two.
talent. I'm saying like the eyeballs,
Sure.
the viewership of it. Angel Reese is the second biggest, star
Name
in the game.
recognition.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's the sort of thing where that matchup still could happen. I mean, LSU has a tough matchup against UCLA, Iowa going up against Colorado. So, comment any reason for you to come off of Iowa? I mean, they haven't been blowing teams out necessarily. I mean, knocked out Holy Cross pretty easily, but a close game against West Virginia. Do you have any concern about your Hawkeyes, or do you still think that they're going to be the team to beat in this tournament?
Not really. I think it's kind of similar to the Dalton Connect thing. I mean, Caitlin Clark, for her high standards, she's still putting up a near triple double, 30 plus points. She's making all her free throws. She's getting steals. She's getting rebounds. She's finding ways to contribute. But for her high standards, her shot has been a little bit off the last few games. Her shot gets back going, they'll be hot. Also, Iowa's a good 3-point shooting team. There's a couple other girls that are good. She was actually the only Iowa Hawkeye to make a three in the last game. So why was the game close? Their 3-point shots were not falling. That's a variance. It's going to happen once in a while.
Sure.
The ball doesn't go in the hoop. I'm not terribly concerned as far as having Iowa in the Final Four. There is a little bit of pause for concern in terms of, are they going to win the whole thing? Because I did pick them because I think South Carolina just looks so dominant at the moment, knocking out a good UNC team by 40 plus. But you know how I am. I'm going to stick with my picks. I'm also a little bit concerned about USC because honestly, when this bracket came out, before the bracket came out, I was looking at my potential Final Four. I was like, Iowa, USC, South Carolina, and UConn. That's the four I wanted to pick. UConn is in the same region as USC. That'd be a great Elite Eight matchup. Juju Watkins versus Paige Beckers. By the way, Tom, Gino Auriemma has said that Paige Beckers is the best player in the country, not Caitlin Clark, not Juju Watkins, not Angel Reese. She is also a phenomenal player. A lot of star power on the women's tournament. So I definitely can see UConn getting past USC, but I'll stick with my picks. I'll stick with USC. I'll stick with Stanford. I'll stick with Iowa. I'll stick with South Carolina. And you know what? For Caitlin Clark missing some shots, she's going to knock out South Carolina just like she did last year, this time in the championship. So I'm going to stick with all my picks. Final Four is intact in both regions. I don't see any reason why I should change picks. So I got Iowa in the women's bracket, UConn in the men's bracket. I'm sticking with all my Final Four picks, Tom.
Yeah, so long as everybody's still in and there's no real cause for concern as far as bigger picture stuff. I'm the same way. South Carolina on my end for the women's bracket. It'll be interesting. I think USC has had a couple of really really big wins against Corpus Christi and Kansas by significant margins. So it'll be interesting to see
that
them.
Bet last night. USC, let's go, Lady Trojans.
I can imagine.
What's up,
yeah.
Kansas? Minus 10.5, baby.
That's a bit concerning for somebody who's got Connecticut in the championship game, but we will see how that all shakes out. So yeah, that wraps up the topical portions. We'll move into our staple segments. We've got locks of the week where we went 5-1 as a show. It's amazing what not picking a long shot tournament winners is going to do for one's chances of hitting on their wagers.
Yeah,
Wagers,
I've got the picks
money,
in here.
But if anybody has been tailing me this season, you find yourselves up 36-21, which is a pretty good way to be. I think it's in the mark for
15
around like
over, baby.
55 to 60% of your bets is where you want to be as far as being a profitable gambler. I think I'm over
You,
that margin.
you're up. If you bet the same amount for every bet and you went with Castle and picks, you're up. You might be up going off my picks as well. Both having a
Sure.
good year. I got 32, 24, and 1. I was 2-1 this week. The one I missed was New Mexico -2 over Clemson. Clemson won big in that game, 77-56. Did hit a couple of my other picks here. Grand Canyon plus 5.5 against St. Mary's. I also had Grand Canyon winning outright. I had that in my bracket. I was correct. Grand Canyon won 75-66. Excuse me. UConn -26.5 over Stetson. They won 91-52. They covered that 26.5 spread in the first half, Tom Castleman.
Mhm.
Huskies look good. Tom had Michigan State -1 over Mississippi State, correct? They won by 18. Oregon money line over South Carolina. They won by 14. And then you had Washington State money line against Drake. They won 66-61. What do you have for us this week, Mr. Nostradamus?
Well, it is definitely not as confident as I felt last week with a lot of these picks because the tournament field is shrinking. The numbers are getting a little bit tighter. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to go here, and I don't necessarily know how confident I feel. I think the one that I feel most confident about, just given how well they've been playing, is Marquette -6 over NC State. NC State has been playing well, but I mean, Texas Tech and Oakland aren't necessarily world beaters. I think that Marquette is going to prove to be a much better test than NC State has faced so far. So that's the one that I think I feel the most confident about. I think a close second is going to be Iowa State -1.5 over Illinois. It's a really short line, but I'm confident or comfortable with laying the points because we've seen Iowa State capable of making some shots. I mean, they go cold for a while, but they also frustrate teams. They're a top defensive team. And we've seen in tournaments past, not necessarily with the same talent, but with the same coach, Brad Underwood, sometimes struggles to adjust his offense or his game plan within the game. I mean, we saw that a couple of years back when it was Loyola as the 8 seed over Illinois as the 1 seed in that second game where Ayo Dosunmu and Kofi Coburn, a top 2-person team, great offense for Illinois, but just could not figure out how to crack Loyola's defense. Iowa State really strong on that front. I mean, of course, Illinois has the talent to absolutely shoot the lights out and just blow this number way out of the water. But in the tournament, I kind of trust defense just like a little bit more.
Of course you do. You're Tom Castleman.
Yeah, and then
just for the record, Tom, of any game out there, the one I feel the least good about is that game. If I had to pick it, I'd flip a coin because that's like the top defense in Iowa State, like one of the top defenses against the top offense against Illinois. I think those are two that, to me, that's a game that if they play 100 times, it's probably 50-50. Yeah, maybe 51-49 Iowa State. I am picking Iowa State because that's what I have in my bracket, but that's one that I was personally staying away from. I can't even bet on it because Illinois is a college team in the state of Illinois, and I'm glad that I can't bet on it because I have no clue who's going to win, but it is the conundrum of offense versus defense. Like you said, you're on the defensive side.
Yeah, and then the other one that I'm going to go with, and this is partly just like a little bit of a jab at you.
Okay, hit me. Alabama
+4.5 against North Carolina. This is a game where I was looking at maybe the total, but 173.5 is where the total's at. That is a super high number. I mean, both teams can get there. The way I see it is that even if UNC is going to win, and of course they're favored to win, Alabama is so good at making shots that I think they'll keep it close throughout. And I think that there is a somewhat decent chance of a little bit of a backdoor cover as well, where they just kind of get like that easy 3 or easy layup at the end of the game, even though it's a 4-point advantage for Carolina or something like that. This is the one that I feel like is most likely to blow up in my face, though, to be perfectly honest. This is not one that I would recommend tailing or doing anything else on that front. I don't know. that's one I don't feel great about a lot of these margins. I mean, of course, I really like UConn. 11 points is a big number against San Diego State, so I can't really pick that with confidence. So I'm going to go here. I mean, I know you're going to go with the Tennessee Creighton game. That might be one where I think that I might actually feel a little bit more confident. But I'm going to stick with Alabama 4.5 plus 4.5 against UNC.
Yeah, the one I feel best about, Tom, is
Yeah,
UNC minus 4.5
there you
against
go.
Alabama. So go figure. Going up against the Nostradamus doesn't make me very confident, given how well you
You're
do.
doing well in your own right. So
I'm
it's
doing
not.
quite well the whole show, man. We are as good as it gets for betting locks of the week. I've got you're 15 over, I'm 8 over and rising. So I'm going to go with this one, UNC minus 4.5 over Bama. Tar Heels are the better team, tons of experience. I've been talking about these guys, RJ Davis, Armando Bacot. Speaking of great 1-2 duos, outside, inside, these guys are great. A lot of good depth for UNC. Their backup point guard's really good as well. They actually play also a kind of a high tempo with like Alabama, but I think they can also slow it down if they have to. Alabama only knows one speed. UNC has a little bit more diversity. Do have a better overall team, more depth for me as well. I love UNC winning by 5 and more in this game. This is probably the one I feel the best about. I was actually eyeing the Marquette one. You have it at -6, right? But I stayed away from it because I want to see an upset, and I don't want to pick it just because we have one double-digit seed in. I also have 7 out of 8 Elite Eight teams, correct, Tom? The one that, or 7 out of 8 still available, rather. The one that I did have was Kentucky against Marquette. So selfishly for the bracket, I would love to see an NC State upset, even though I do agree with you. If my life was on the line, I would pick Marquette -6. But I just couldn't pick that one. I was written down and I was like, no, I want NC State to win. I can't pick that one. But love the UNC one. I also love the UConn line, -11 over San Diego State. It doesn't scare me. 11 points. I mean, come on. UConn's going to be up 11 plus at the half. By the way, for guys that don't like the backdoor cover, maybe bet the UConn first half line.
-6.
But I'm going with the full game. UConn -11. Rematch of last year's national title game, but UConn, I think, is considerably better than they were last year. San Diego State, not as good as they were last year for me. The Huskies have been obliterating teams by 15, 20, 30, 40 points. Even some of the top teams, like the Marquettes of the world in the Big East, the Creightons of the world. I know Creighton got them once, but UConn also got Creighton as well. Man, I think that UConn team is going to just leave no doubt, baby. They will win by 12 or more, no problem. And then the third one, which I actually feel the worst about, but you were right. I'm going with it. Tennessee -3 over Creighton. I know they've had a lot of time to prepare. I know it's been a few days later, but, double overtime game for Creighton. I think Tennessee plays a really strong physical defense. I think they'll wear Creighton out by the end of the game. Like I said earlier, I love the point guard Ziegler and Dalton Knecht, who is one of the best players in the country, will start connecting with those three-point shots because his outside shooting has been miserable time. Law of averages, Dalton Knecht gets hot. Tennessee wins by more than 3 against Creighton.
All right, looking forward to those matchups starting off on Thursday. Holy Thursday for Catholics too, who celebrate the Triduum. So I will be tuning into those games late. I'll be seeing a lot of results on my phone later on in the evening. Unfortunately, I won't be able to catch all of those, but looking forward to see what those results are heading into the weekend. Moving on to trivia. Common, you said you have some opening day trivia.
Yes.
We get a little baseball on the show.
Yeah, so we did do our baseball preview 2 weeks ago. I know we did a lot of NFL free agency last week. I know this is just a March Madness show. We'll have more NFL draft stuff in the coming weeks, some more baseball. We'll touch on some NBA as the playoffs are nearing by. But, for the guys wondering, where's the baseball talk? We did our whole preview 2 weeks ago. Go to the Salute Your Sports Facebook page or go to my YouTube channel, Common Enchev. You can find that episode there. But I didn't want to leave baseball completely out of the show because it is opening day on Thursday. We're recording on a Tuesday today. So I had a trivia question, Tom.
Mhm.
Can you name the top 5 most starts by a pitcher on opening day? Pitchers who have the most starts on opening day. Who are they and how many starts? And a lot of these guys are a little bit
Hmm.
old school guys.
Gotcha.
So start
Top
thinking old
5.
school.
Start thinking old school. So the first one I'm gonna go with is Whitey Ford for the New York Yankees?
No, but there
No.
is a Yankee and another guy who also played with the Yankees at one point
Hmm.
on this list. So there's one more modern guy we watched, and there's 4
Okay.
guys that we haven't watched.
Okay. So one guy that we have, I'll just start there thinking like who would have gotten a lot of opening day starts? So would Greg Maddux be on that list?
Not
No,
Greg Maddux,
not Maddux. Maybe Mark Burley. He had a lot of starts for the White Sox, but probably not enough.
not Mark
Felix
Burley.
Hernandez for the Mariners.
No, but this guy was a Mariner and a Yankee, the modern day guy who's tied for second. Four-way tie for second,
So
by the way, Tom.
that tells me Randy Johnson then.
Randy Johnson. And can you guess the
Hmm.
number of starts he had? Because we have one guy that had the most, and then we have a four-way tie for second for most starts.
I'm just gonna guess like 16 opening day starts.
That is the record. 16 is the most,
Hmm.
but the four-way tie for second is not 16, a little bit lower.
Like okay, it's like 14 then maybe 13, 14.
14.
Nice. All right, so
Yeah.
you got Randy Johnson, got the one modern guy. Let's see, Bob Feller for Cleveland. That was during World War II, so not him.
I'll tell you a
Maybe.
couple guys that it's not. Roger Clemens is 13 starts, one back.
Mhm.
We have Justin Verlander, 12 starts. He's actually
Hmm.
not far off. But go ahead with your guesses.
Let's see, maybe Walter Johnson for the Washington Senators.
Yeah, Walter Johnson,
All
14
right, that's.
starts.
Let's see, who else? Would it be the obvious Cy Young?
Not Cy Young.
Not Cy Young. Oh wow.
No.
Okay.
We have
Um,
another lefty.
another
Lefty,
lefty.
former Phillies pitcher.
Oh, Carlton.
Steve Carlton.
Steve Carlton. Yeah.
Four-time Cy Young Award winner,
Mhm.
started 14 games as well on opening day. So Steve Carlton, Randy Johnson, Walter Johnson. Then we have one more guy that had 14 starts.
One more guy that had
That's tied for
14.
second. Also old school. Let me get you
Old
a better clue for
school.
him.
Not like Eddie Collins.
I guess he's not as old school. He pitched primarily in the 80s, but a little bit in the
Hmm.
70s and 90s as well.
Palmer? Jim Palmer? Or is it Jim
Not
Palmer?
not Jim
Hmm.
Palmer. American League pitcher. You know, relative to these other guys, he's probably a little
Hmm.
bit less good. He is a Hall of Famer, but it was the modern baseball era committee that voted him in. I mean, this guy obviously a
Hmm.
great, great pitcher. All these guys are, but relative to probably the other guys on this list, probably the
Hmm.
least good one of the bunch.
Hmm. Jack Morris?
Jack Morris, how'd you get that, Tom? I'm impressed.
Well, I know like he was on the Hall of Fame ballot for forever and didn't get in. And then I was
Yeah.
just kind of thinking like, okay, who's like a workhorse type pitcher from like way back in the day? Actually, I had his baseball card in my collection a while
Okay.
back. So that's just a name that I kind of like threw a dart at, honestly.
All right. This one, also old school.
This is the
The guy,
record.
16.
Also
16.
old school. Can I get a decade maybe or an era?
Yes. This is why he's on here. He pitched in the primarily the 70s, but also the late 60s and about half of the 80s. Actually, I think his last opening day start I read was actually with the White Sox, Tom.
Oh, that's the biggest clue. Tom Seaver.
Tom Seaver. I was going to say the
Yeah.
other clue that I wanted to give was you might like his name, but I thought that might give it away.
No. The White Sox one doesn't because he was on the Mets forever, and then in typical White Sox fashion, they pick up a Hall of Fame player in like the last year or two of his career.
Like
See
Griffey.
Manny Ramirez, Ken Griffey. Who
He was
else
a
is
White
there?
Sox. You know,
Yeah,
he was a
yeah,
White Sox.
yeah. Hall of Fame. Hall of Fame
Yeah.
White Sox. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good trivia. Yeah.
So,
Opening day, technically already kind of sort of
Yeah.
started in
The Padres
Korea.
and Dodgers played last week, but I
Yeah,
call opening day the day where the whole majors
yeah,
play. Like that's what
exactly.
I consider Thursday to be opening day.
Major League Baseball does a pretty poor job marketing their game nationally. I think this is more of like a global push because I think to watch that game in particular, you'd have to be up at like 4 or 5 in the morning
Yep.
Central Time,
I
which
did
means on
not
the
stay.
West
I
Coast,
did not wake
basically
up.
you just don't go to bed. You pull a common Enchev and you watch it at
Hmm.
2, 3 in the morning.
Yep.
um,
I'm
but
closer to staying up rather
yeah,
than waking up early for that game.
exactly. But a league that does do marketing really, really well, and I'm really disappointed that I'm saying this, it's the NFL. The NFL does a great job marketing its games, and it is absolutely shameful that the NFL is putting another game on Christmas Day this year. Made sense last year with Christmas Day, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and the New Year's Eve, New Year's Day falling on a Saturday Sunday combination. This year, Christmas is on a Wednesday. I don't know if we've ever had a Wednesday NFL game before, but the NFL looked at the numbers that they drew for the holidays
Of
and
course.
said, we want in on that. No longer is it just going to be the NBA with its Christmas slate of games. The NFL is has announced that they're going to have a game on December 25th. Of course,
Hmm.
with the 26th being a Thursday, this year they will have a Thursday night game as well. And then, of course, 28th, 29th, and 30th, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, they're going to have some games. But it's just, I think this is
NBA's
just
mad about it. NBA's not
NBA is
happy with
mad.
it.
NBA should absolutely be furious. I mean, I understand that because the college football season is over, the antitrust exemption or the trust exemption that the NFL has, where they can't put games on Fridays or Saturdays because that's like high school, college football. That those are meant to be island games that the NFL cannot touch. I think that this is
That's
going to
during
kind
the
of sort of
season. They
hurt
have
during the
games
season. Correct? Yeah,
Saturdays.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. Of course. With that, I think this is the NFL continuing to push a little bit more for what they really, really want, which is that 18 game season with 2 bye weeks. And the way that the NFL is going to be able to try to kind of cajole this out of the players' union is, hey, look at how many people watch us on Christmas. It's not just Thanksgiving anymore with 3 Thursday games. We can have Christmas whatever day of the week it happens to fall on, even if it's a Wednesday. I have no idea. I guess you'd have I don't even know how you'd have a game on Wednesday if you have teams that have played on the previous Sunday, or maybe they're going to try to shoehorn in some Saturday games on that week just to give the teams like a little bit of a break. Like,
or they're
a,
coming off a
a,
bye or something.
yeah, like that's a really really late bye. That might like what I'm saying is like going with the 18 game schedule and with the 2 bye week system
Sure.
is you could say, hey, we're going to give you a buy and say like maybe like October, not really September. We'll give you an October buy and we'll give you a December buy heading into the Christmas Day game. So that way you're plenty rested. But for this year, this schedule, it doesn't say what week that falls on, but typically that's like week 16, 17, 18. There are no week 15 buys. The last bye
Hmm.
week currently happens on December 14th. So I don't know if they're going to do like a special exemption where they just put 2 teams on by really, really, really late into the season
They'll
for this
probably do the
game.
Saturday thing.
They'll probably do the Saturday thing, but like we hear from NFL players all the time, we're like they can barely get themselves physically recovered to play Thursday night games, let alone playing on Christmas Day. So I mean, it's clearly it's a money grab. We talk about the league, and we can
Sure.
get to some of these rule changes later, but they're changing the kickoff, to be more injury conscious. They're taking away the hip drop tackle, which don't get me wrong, good decision as far as like putting player safety first. But then when you turn around and do that, it's a really two faced way, I think, of approaching the issue. The NFL just going with a pure cash grab here. It's not like the NBA where you're just running up and down a court where it's a contact but not a collision sport. NFL's pure collision, and I think this is just like really really rough on the players to put it on the 25th, to put it on a Wednesday specifically.
As a sports fan, sign me up, baby. Christmas
I know
football.
I'm not like
Let's go, Tom. Sign me up. Oh, what am I doing? I'm watching it, baby. I'm
depends on
watching
when the
it.
game is. Not very few things are going to get between me and my Christmas dinner. Let me tell you.
Okay. You don't have TV on in the background if there's a big game going on? No, not the
No.
Castleman way. That's
Like,
fair.
if it were just me and Jenna, maybe, but, like, if we're, like, hosting Christmas, we're at my parents' house for Christmas or wherever, like, we're not gonna be like, "Hey, put on the game." Like,
Oh, I
forget
would
this
so do
holiday
that.
family time.
I would so do that, but that's just me. So yeah, I mean, look, I get the whole player safety thing. It's kind of hard, but I guess how different is it than the Sunday Thursday? If they're gonna do Sunday Thursday, you might as well do Saturday Wednesday. I don't know if they're gonna do a special buy, but it is a business, Tom. I know we always talk about
Yeah.
this. It is a business, and it is a smart business move for the NFL. Like you said, marketing their guys. How else do you market them? Everyone's home. It's cold
Yeah.
outside.
Doesn't
You've
have to be
had
good football, it just
you've
has to
had
be turn down the TV.
you've had enough family time already. You need a break. Put on the football game, baby. Put on the football game. My statement of the week, I am sticking with the March Madness theme. I'm going to go ahead and be confident out there, Tom. It is statement of the
Mhm.
week, which, is ideally designed to be a bold statement, which I guess in many ways yours is a bold statement. Mine, I would say, is kind of bold too. I'm going to, put my mouth where my picks are. I'm going to take right now, and I actually don't know what the betting is. Maybe I'll place a bet on it. Maybe I won't. Actually, let me look it up right now. Let me look it up real quick. The
Mm,
very updated odds on this, because it's got to be plus money. And
mm.
plus money sounds good. I guess let me look real quickly. You might know where I'm headed with this, Tom. Let's see here.
I actually am a little bit curious.
Okay,
Are you going with a future?
a
Is
very, very.
combination going with a future bet?
I know I don't do it.
It's gonna
I
take
don't do it
weeks to pay off.
normally.
What you're gonna be racking your brain, just pulling your hair out,
I
waiting for
know.
it to cash?
All right, plus 210. UConn versus the Field to not make the Final Four to win the whole darn thing, baby. The
I
Huskies.
didn't expect you to go there. I thought you were gonna go
Yeah.
with Iowa.
No. Oh, the women's side,
Yeah, the
right?
women's side, yeah.
No, 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 no. I know I'm a Caitlin Clark fan, but inside, I know there's probably at least a 50% chance South Carolina's going to win. They're the best team, as they
Mhm,
say. But no, I'm going UConn, who is the best team in the country. Tristan Newton, Cam Spencer, Alex Caravan. They have the big guy down low now as well. They have so much depth. They're a great coach team by Dan Hurley.
mhm.
I think they're going to be the tournament champion. I feel really good about it. Good enough that I would say if I had to pick either UConn or the Field, I would pick UConn because it's a 4-game tournament for them at this stage. And I think every single game going in, I'm like, yeah, UConn's going to win. UConn's going to win. Their region doesn't scare me that much. They get in the Final Four, Tom. After that, it's only 2 games. That's all it takes, 2 games. And I think I would definitely take them. That's my pick. I think they're the favorite, but they are rightfully so the favorite. Plus 210, though, some good juice.
Mhm.
UConn Huskies versus the Field, the Kamenechev statement of the week in the March
Wow.
Madness.
I mean, I can't really disagree with that. I mean, that's one where
Look, if you had to bet, if your life was on the line, you had to pick either or. You're picking UConn, right, Tom?
yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that's what I'm doing with the bracket. That's what I did when it was 6 games. If you took that future way back when, you would have
Would
gotten
have been even better.
even better odds on that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I don't disagree with that whatsoever.
Cool. All right. Well, another fun show. A little bit shorter than last week's
We had to balance out
extravaganza.
a little bit,
The
yeah.
marathon last week, March Madness and NFL free agency. We'll be back next week. I guess next week we'll be talking about the Final Four teams. At that stage, we could
Mhm.
probably just pick both games. I know we stayed away from
Oh,
picking
yeah.
because there's so many games, but we could kind of pick both games. We'll see what else we'll touch on. Maybe football, maybe NBA, maybe maybe MLB. We'll definitely find something else to talk
Mhm.
about besides March Madness next week. But another fun show. Hopefully the brackets aren't too busted by next week because they're looking good so far, Tom. Looking forward to kind of catching up because I think it is mathematically possible that I clinch the bracket over you by next week. It would
Could
involve
be.
UNC knocking off Arizona, obviously. That's
Mhm.
the big one. Because if Arizona beats UNC, then I'm going to definitely need Houston to beat Purdue, which is where I get
Yeah.
a little bit nervous. So depending on the UNC Arizona results, we'll have a little bit more of a update on our brackets. Definitely looking forward to that. Tar Heels, baby. Have a good week, Tom, and we'll do the show again next week. Always a pleasure. Thank you to the guys watching, listening to this program. You guys are awesome. Tom, I'll see you next week, my man.